Western philosophy has long sought to understand the world through reason, logic, and elaborate conceptual systems. For centuries, thinkers have constructed intellectual edifices to explain reality, to give it meaning, to demonstrate that there exists an underlying order to what surrounds us. Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher born in 1788 and died in 1860, proposed something radically different. His vision of the world does not seek to reassure, does not promise a hidden meaning that would justify our presence here. On the contrary, it unveils a far more disturbing reality, that of a fundamentally absurd existence, driven by a blind force that we do not understand and will never truly understand. To grasp Schopenhauer's thought, one must first understand that it rests on a fundamental distinction, a division of reality into two radically different aspects. On one side, there is what Schopenhauer calls representation, on the other, what he calls will. This division is not a simple abstract classification. It determines his entire understanding of human existence, of suffering, of desire, of love, and ultimately of the meaning, or rather, the absence of meaning in our lives. Let us begin with representation. What does this mean exactly? Representation designates the world as it appears to our consciousness. It is the world of objects, phenomena, events that unfold in space and time. It is the world we perceive daily, the one we touch, see, hear. It is the world that science studies, that reason analyzes, that intellect seeks to understand. In this world of representation, things seem to have an order. Events follow causal laws. A cause produces an effect. Each phenomenon can be explained by what precedes it. The sun rises because the earth rotates. Water boils because it is heated to 100 degrees Celsius. A body falls because gravity pulls it toward the ground. Everything seems rational, comprehensible, predictable. This world of representation obeys what philosophers call the principle of sufficient reason. Nothing happens without a reason. For every effect, there exists a cause. For every phenomenon, there exists an explanation. Modern science rests entirely on this principle. It seeks to establish the laws that govern phenomena, to predict what will occur based on what has already occurred. And this approach works remarkably well in the world of representation. We can predict eclipses, calculate the trajectory of planets, anticipate chemical reactions, understand biological mechanisms. But this world of representation possesses another essential characteristic. It is structured by space and time. We cannot think of an object without situating it somewhere in space. We cannot conceive of an event outside all temporality. Space and time are not simply external frameworks in which things would exist. They are the very conditions of our experience of the world. Our mind is so constituted that it can apprehend reality only through these two fundamental forms, space and time. Schopenhauer takes up here a central idea from Kant's philosophy. Space and time are not properties of things in themselves, but a priori forms of our sensibility. They are glasses we cannot remove, through which we necessarily see the world. Imagine that you had worn blue-tinted glasses since birth. You would see the entire world in blue, and you could not even conceive that things might have other colors. Space and time function in this manner. They color all our perception. They structure all our experience, and we cannot imagine what a perception would be that did not pass through them. This spatio-temporal structure of the world of representation has profound consequences. It creates what Schopenhauer calls the principle of individuation. Because things exist in space and time, they are separated from one another. This tree is distinct from that other tree. This person is different from that other person. I am me, and you are you. We are separate individuals. with our distinct bodies, our isolated consciousnesses, our own perspectives on the world. This separation seems obvious, natural, indisputable. Look around you. You see distinct objects, different people, separate events. How could it be otherwise? And yet, for Schopenhauer, this obviousness constitutes one of the great illusions of the world of representation. This separation between beings and things is only apparent. It results from our spatio-temporal mode of perception, but it does not correspond to ultimate reality. At the deepest level, at the level of what Schopenhauer calls will, there is no separation. There is only one reality, undivided, which manifests itself through the multiplicity of phenomena. For the world of representation is precisely just that, a representation. It is not ultimate reality, it is a surface, an appearance, a phenomenon. Behind this surface, or rather in it, through it, hides something deeper, more primordial, more real. Schopenhauer names this ultimate reality will. And it is here that his philosophy takes a truly original and troubling turn. The will of which Schopenhauer speaks has nothing to do with what we usually mean by this term. It is not individual will, the capacity to choose, to decide, to consciously direct one's actions. When we say, "I decided to do this," or "I want that," we are speaking of our personal will, of this faculty that seems to allow us to choose between different options. This is not the will of which Schopenhauer speaks. The will he discusses is something far vaster, far more primitive, far more terrible as well. Schopenhauerian will is the thing in itself, to use Kantian vocabulary. It is reality as it exists independently of our perception, independently of our consciousness, independently of the forms of space and time that structure our experience. Kant had posited the existence of this thing in itself, but he had said it was totally unknowable. We can know only phenomena, that is to say, things as they appear to us, not things as they are in themselves. Schopenhauer goes further. He claims to have identified what the thing in itself is. It is will. This will possesses characteristics that make it fundamentally different from the world of representation. First, it escapes the principle of sufficient reason. In the world of representation, everything has a cause, everything can be explained, but will itself has no cause. It cannot be explained by something anterior or exterior to it. Will is without why. It is, simply. This absence of reason, this impossibility of accounting for its existence through a cause or explanation, makes will something fundamentally irrational. One cannot understand why it exists. One cannot understand where it comes from. One cannot find for it a justification or finality that would transcend it. Think about this for a moment. We are accustomed to seeking explanations for everything. Why is this tree there? Because a seed was planted. Why was the seed planted? Because a gardener did it. Why did the gardener do it? To beautify the garden, and so on. Each answer refers to a further question, but this chain of explanations must stop somewhere. There must be a point beyond which one can no longer ask why. This point is will. It is the ultimate foundation that cannot itself be founded. Next, will does not exist in space and time. These forms belong uniquely to the world of representation. Will is beyond space, beyond time. It is nowhere and everywhere at once. It has neither beginning nor end. It is eternal, but not in the sense of an infinite duration in time, rather in the sense of an existence outside time. Try to conceive of something that exists neither in space nor in time. It is extremely difficult, almost impossible. Our brain is wired to think in spatio-temporal terms. When we are told outside time, we spontaneously imagine a very long duration, a temporal eternity. But this is not what Schopenhauer means. He speaks of an existence that has no relation to temporality, that is neither in time nor outside time in the sense of duration, but that is of another order than time. This characteristic makes will extremely difficult to conceive for our intellect, precisely because our intellect functions necessarily through the categories of space and time. Trying to think will is like trying to see without eyes, or hear without ears. Our conceptual tools are inadequate to this task. This is why Schopenhauer says that will cannot truly be known by intellect. It can only be intuitively felt, guessed, approached indirectly. Finally, will is one. It is not divided, not fragmented, not individuated. The principle of individuation belongs to the world of representation, not to that of will. There is only one will, unique, indivisible, which manifests itself through the multiplicity of phenomena. This stone, this tree, this animal, this human being, all are manifestations of the same unique will. The separation we perceive between beings and things is an illusion created by our spatio-temporal mode of perception. Imagine the ocean. On the surface, you see waves. Each wave seems to be a distinct entity. This wave is different from that wave. They have different shapes, different heights. They appear at different moments. But in reality, all these waves are only manifestations of the same water, of the same ocean. The separation between waves is superficial, apparent. At bottom, there is only one mass of water. In the same way, all beings and all things are only waves on the surface of the unique will. We seem separated, distinct, but this separation is only an appearance linked to our mode of perception. But what is the relation between will and representation? How do these two aspects of reality articulate? For Schopenhauer, the world of representation is the objectivation of will. It is the manner in which will makes itself visible, perceptible, knowable. Will in itself is invisible, impalpable, directly unknowable, but it manifests itself, objectifies itself, takes form in the phenomenal world. All the things we perceive are nothing other than will giving itself to be seen under different aspects. The term objectivation is important here. It signifies becoming object, transforming into something that can be perceived, observed, objectively known. Will, which in itself is pure subjectivity, pure interior force, projects itself, so to speak, outside itself, and becomes the world of objects that we perceive. This process is not temporal. One must not imagine that at a given moment will decide to manifest itself. Objectivation is a logical and metaphysical relation, not a historical event. This objectivation occurs according to different degrees. At the lowest level, will manifests itself in the most elementary natural forces, gravity, magnetism, chemical forces. When a stone falls, it is will that expresses itself in its simplest, most direct form. The stone does not choose to fall. It has no consciousness, no intention. And yet, in its fall, it manifests a form of willing, the tendency to direct itself toward the center of the earth. This tendency is not different, essentially, from the willing that animates living beings. It is simply a more primitive, more elementary form of the same fundamental willing. Then will objectifies itself in the plant world, where already appears a form of life, a tendency to persevere in being, to grow, to reproduce. The plant grows toward light. Its roots sink into the soil to seek water and nutrients. It flowers and produces seeds to ensure its descendants. All these activities manifest a will to live, an effort to exist and perpetuate itself. The plant does not think, does not reflect, probably has no consciousness, but it wills, in the Schopenhauerian sense of the term. It is will that objectifies itself in plant form. Next comes the animal kingdom, where will takes a more complex form, endowed with sensitivity, capacity for movement, instincts. The animal feels pain and pleasure. It flees what threatens its survival and seeks what favors its well-being. It hunts, feeds itself, seeks a partner to reproduce. All these activities are guided by instincts, impulses that do not arise from rational calculation, but that directly express will to live. The animal is more clearly, more visibly will than the plant or stone. In it, the impulsive, blind, irresistible character of will becomes manifest. And finally, at the summit of this hierarchy stands the human being, where will objectifies itself in its most developed form, accompanied by consciousness, reason, intellect. The human being does not content itself with living and reproducing like animals and plants. It thinks, it reflects, it questions itself and about the world. It creates works of art, philosophical systems, complex civilizations. It seems to be of an entirely other nature than animals, plants and stones. But attention, this hierarchy does not signify that the human being is fundamentally different from the stone or the animal. All are manifestations of the same unique will. The difference is only in the degree of objectivation, in the complexity of the form taken by will. The human being is not above nature, it is an integral part of it. It is not an empire within an empire, to take up Spinoza's expression. It is nature, will, just like everything else. This vision has considerable consequences. It signifies that the human being does not have a privileged place in the universe. It is not the goal of creation. It is not the chosen of the gods. It is not bearer of a particular metaphysical dignity. It is simply one form among others that blind will takes. Its consciousness, its reason, its intellect are not divine gifts that would elevate it above the rest of creation. They are simply tools that will has developed to better perpetuate itself, to better survive, to better reproduce. The human intellect, this faculty we value so much, is in reality only an instrument in the service of will. Its primary function is not to know truth or to contemplate beauty, but to help the individual satisfy its vital needs and avoid dangers. Intellect calculates, plans, anticipates the consequences of actions. It allows the human being to hunt more effectively, to construct shelters, to create tools, to foresee seasons, and to store food. All these capacities serve survival and reproduction, that is to say, the perpetuation of will. Certainly, the human intellect can also occupy itself with apparently disinterested questions, philosophy, pure mathematics, poetry. But even these activities, for Schopenhauer, remain secondary compared to the principal function of intellect. They are possible only when the immediate needs of survival are satisfied. A man dying of hunger does not philosophize. It is only when will has obtained what it wants, food, security, comfort, that intellect can permit itself to distance itself temporarily from its utilitarian function. For here is the essential characteristic of will. It wills. But what does it will? It wills nothing other than itself. It wills to exist, to persevere, to maintain itself, to propagate itself. Will is will to live. It is this fundamental impulse that pushes all beings to remain in existence, to avoid destruction, to seek their conservation. This impulse is justified by nothing. It has no goal beyond itself. Will wills to live in order to live, without reason, without finality, without meaning. Think of your own experience. You want to continue living. This will to live is so obvious, so natural, that you do not even think about it most of the time. But if someone asks you, why do you want to live? What do you answer? Perhaps you will say, because I have projects. people I love, things I want to accomplish. But all these reasons presuppose already that you want to live. They are not the cause of your will to live, they are its manifestations. The will to live itself has no reason. It is first, fundamental, irreducible. In the human being, this will to live takes multiple forms. It manifests itself first in what is called the instinct of self-preservation. Faced with danger, the body reacts automatically to protect itself. The heart beats faster, adrenaline rises, muscles tense, ready to flee or fight. All these reactions are involuntary, unconscious, automatic. They do not arise from a rational choice. If someone throws an object at your face, you close your eyes and turn your head before even having had time to think. It is will that acts directly, without passing through the mediation of consciousness. They are the direct expression of will that seeks to maintain itself in existence. No one consciously decides to want to survive. This will to survive is anterior to all decision, to all reflection. It is the very basis of our being. A newborn, who has no developed consciousness yet, no capacity for reasoning, already manifests an intense will to live. It cries when hungry. It grips when afraid of falling. This will has not been taught to it. It is innate, constitutive of its being. Will to live also manifests itself in all our desires. We desire food when we are hungry, because food is necessary for our survival. We desire comfort and security, because they favor our conservation. We desire pleasure, because in nature's logic, pleasure is generally associated with what is good for our survival and reproduction. We desire social recognition because, in a social context, our position in the group affects our chances of survival and reproduction. These desires seem personal, individual, freely chosen. We have the impression of desiring what we want to desire. You choose to eat this dish rather than that one, to pursue this career rather than that one, to frequent these people rather than those. All these decisions seem to be yours, the product of your free will. But for Schopenhauer, all these desires are only manifestations of will that acts through you. You are not the authors of your desires. You are their instruments, their vehicles. Will desires through you, and you believe these are your desires. This perspective completely reverses the idea we usually have of ourselves. We like to think we are free, that we choose our actions, that we direct our life according to our own will. The image we have of ourselves is that of a captain at the helm of his ship, deciding the direction to take, mastering his destiny. We see ourselves as autonomous subjects, capable of deliberating rationally and deciding accordingly. It is this image that founds our sense of responsibility, our pride in our accomplishments, our feeling of guilt for our failures. For Schopenhauer, this image is an illusion, perhaps the most tenacious and most dangerous of all illusions. In reality, we are not free. We are determined by will that expresses itself through us. Our actions do not result from conscious choices, but from the blind activity of will. We are not the captain of the ship, we are the ship itself, pushed by winds and currents we do not control. Intellect, reason, consciousness are only epiphenomena, secondary productions of will. Their function is not to make us free, but to serve will, to help it in its task of conservation and reproduction. Intellect is in the service of will, as an instrument is in the service of the one who uses it. It calculates, plans, anticipates, but always with the goal of satisfying the demands of will to live. When you believe you are reflecting freely, rationally weighing arguments, choosing autonomously, in reality, will has already decided, and intellect only justifies after the fact, rationalizes, gives an appearance of reason to what is only a blind impulse. Let us take a concrete example. You meet two people, and must choose with which to develop a friendship. You conscientiously weigh the pros and cons. One is more intelligent, the other funnier. One shares your intellectual interests, the other your tastes in leisure activities. You reflect, you compare, you end up choosing. You have the impression of having made a free and rational choice. But for Schopenhauer, what really happened is that your will, for reasons that escape you and that are linked to your innate character, was already attracted to one of these people. And your intellect simply provided reasons that justify this pre-existing attraction. You did not choose according to reasons. You found reasons to justify a choice already made by your will. This idea becomes particularly striking when applied to the domain of love and sexuality. For it is in this domain that will manifests itself in the most powerful, most direct, most imperious manner. And it is also in this domain that the illusion of freedom and meaning is strongest. Consider romantic attraction. Two people meet, their gazes cross. Something happens, something indefinable. One feels an attraction toward the other. This attraction can be immediate, lightning fast, what is called love at first sight. Or it can develop gradually over encounters. In all cases, it seems mysterious, inexplicable, unique. People speak of love at first sight, chemistry, elective affinities, soulmates. Lovers have the impression of living something profoundly personal, meaningful, potentially transcendent. They seek in this encounter a communion of souls, a spiritual fusion, an existential fulfillment. Ask someone why they fell in love with a particular person, and they will give you reasons. She is beautiful, he is intelligent, we share the same values, she understands me like no one else. All these reasons sound sincere, convincing, but they are, for Schopenhauer, only rationalizations after the fact. The true reason for the attraction escapes the consciousness of those who experience it. For Schopenhauer, all this is only illusion. Romantic attraction has nothing mysterious about it. It is explained entirely by the needs of will, or more precisely, by the needs of the species. For will does not only want to preserve itself in the existing individual, it also wants to reproduce itself, to perpetuate itself through new individuals. The species must continue, life must propagate itself, and for this, individuals must mate, reproduce, engender offspring. In animals, this process is relatively simple and direct. The male is attracted to the female in heat. They mate. The female gives birth to young. All this happens instinctively, without great mental elaboration. But human beings are not simple animals that mate mechanically as soon as instinct commands. They are endowed with consciousness, reason, supposed dignity. They have developed moral codes, social conventions, spiritual ideals. The idea of mating brutally to reproduce the species would offend their self-love, their conception of themselves as superior beings. This is where the ruse of will intervenes. It envelops sexual instinct in a veil of sentiment, emotion, romanticism. It creates the illusion of love. Love, according to Schopenhauer, is nothing other than sexual instinct, disguised, adorned, sublimated. It is the manner in which nature, that is to say will, makes conscious individuals accept their reproductive function. Instead of perceiving themselves as simple instruments of the perpetuation of the species, lovers believe they are living a unique, profound, spiritual experience. They believe they are freely choosing each other. They believe their union has a meaning that transcends them, that it is willed by destiny, blessed by the gods, written in the stars. In reality, they blindly obey the imperatives of the species. This analysis may seem cynical, disenchanted, reductive. It certainly is. Schopenhauer does not seek to celebrate love or to emphasize its beauties. He seeks to unveil its hidden mechanism. But Schopenhauer does not seek to spare our illusions. He seeks to unveil the truth, however unpleasant it may be, and this truth is that we are not the authors of our love life. We are its playthings. Let us consider more precisely how this mechanics of attraction functions. Why does a particular person attract us rather than another? Why do we feel sexual desire for certain individuals and not for others? If you pose this question to people, you will get all sorts of answers. Some will speak of physical beauty, others of charm, intelligence, humor, kindness. Some will say they seek someone who resembles them, others, someone who completes them. Some will invoke precise criteria, others will simply say they feel it, without being able to explain it. The romantic answer would say there is a mysterious correspondence of souls, a secret harmony, a mutual recognition. Two souls were destined for each other from always, and when they finally meet, they recognize each other. This explanation is beautiful, poetic. It nourishes countless novels and films, but it rests on nothing tangible. It is a beautiful story we tell ourselves to give meaning to what has none. The Schopenhauerian answer is much more prosaic. It is a question of genetic complementarity. The species wants to produce the best possible descendants. For this, it must compensate the weaknesses of each individual by the strengths of the other. A short man will be unconsciously attracted to a tall woman, so that their children will have average height, neither too tall nor too short. A woman of frail constitution will be attracted to a robust man, to compensate for her weakness. A man of melancholic temperament will be attracted to a joyful woman, to balance the psychological disposition of the progeny. These attractions do not arise from conscious calculation. No one explicitly says to themselves, "This person would well compensate my genetic defects, I should therefore fall in love with her." No, the process happens at a deeper, instinctive level, where the will of the species operates directly. The individual simply feels an attraction, without understanding its real cause. They believe they are following their heart, their own desire, their personal preference. In reality, they obey imperatives that completely surpass them. They are manipulated by the species, used as an instrument in the great enterprise of life's reproduction. And for this manipulation to function, it must remain unconscious. If lovers were fully conscious that they are only means in the service of the perpetuation of the species, that they are manipulated by biological forces that mock their individual happiness, that they are pawns in a game whose rules they do not understand, they might revolt, refuse to play the game. Hence the necessity of the amorous illusion. The species must make individuals believe they are acting for themselves, for their personal happiness, when in reality they are acting for it. This illusion takes many forms. There is the illusion of exclusivity. The loved person seems unique, irreplaceable, incomparable. You are the only one for me. I have never felt this for anyone else. You are special. These declarations seem sincere, and they often are, but they do not reflect an objective truth. In reality, the loved person is simply the one who, at this precise moment, best corresponds to the reproductive needs of the individual. If this person had never been encountered, another would probably have played the same role. There is the illusion of eternity. Love seems to last forever. I will love you always. Our love is eternal. Nothing can separate us. And yet, how many eternal loves end in bitter divorces? For Schopenhauer, this is easily explained. Intense love will last as long as the reproductive task lasts, and will often fade once children are born and raised. The species needed the two parents to stay together, to raise the offspring. Once this task is accomplished, intense attraction has no more reason to be. What remains may be affection, habit, an attachment based on years of life together. But the initial passion, that powerful force that pushed lovers toward each other, that force was in the service of reproduction, and it disappears when it is no longer necessary. There is the illusion of depth. Love seems to touch the very essence of our being. She understands who I really am. With him, I can be myself. It's a soul-to-soul connection. And yet, this supposed spiritual depth often hides a much more down-to-earth reality. In reality, love touches only our biological function of reproduction. All the depth, all the spirituality with which we surround it are only veils thrown over this brutal reality. The process of seduction particularly well illustrates this dynamic. A man courts a woman. He deploys considerable efforts to conquer her. He shows himself attentive, generous, witty, poetic. He offers her flowers, takes her to restaurants, writes her impassioned letters, or in the modern era, romantic messages. He attentively listens to what she says, remembers details about her, interests himself in her passions. He shows patience, respects her rhythm, does not rush her. All this seems to testify to a disinterested sentiment, a pure admiration, an authentic love. But if one looks at the situation more coldly, one notes that all these approaches have a unique goal: to obtain the sexual union that will permit reproduction. The man does not deploy all these efforts out of pure disinterest. He deploys them because it is the path that leads to the satisfaction of his sexual desire and, beyond that, to reproduction. If he could directly obtain what he wants without going through all this process of seduction, he would probably do so. But social conventions, cultural expectations, feminine psychological mechanisms mean that this direct path is blocked. One must therefore take a detour. Seduction is a detour, an indirect path toward this goal. In animals, the path is direct. The male mates with the female as soon as she is receptive. There are no romantic dinners among animals, no declarations of love, no poetry. In humans, this direct path is blocked by social conventions, moral prohibitions, modesty, supposed dignity. One must therefore take a detour, which passes through seduction, romanticism, the declaration of love, perhaps marriage. But the goal remains the same: copulation and reproduction. Once this goal is achieved, once children are conceived, the intensity of amorous sentiment often diminishes considerably. The husband and wife who loved each other passionately, who could not do without each other, who saw the other as the most extraordinary person in the world, become routine partners, roommates, sometimes even strangers to each other. They wonder where the magic has gone, why the flame has extinguished, what has changed. Some accuse the other of having changed. Others reproach themselves for not having known how to maintain the flame. Still others conclude that they were ultimately not made for each other. This evolution has nothing surprising from the Schopenhauerian point of view. The will of the species has obtained what it wanted. It no longer needs to maintain the amorous illusion at its maximum level of intensity. Individuals then discover, often with bitterness, that they perhaps did not have much in common, that their union was not as deep as they believed, that the great love they thought they were living was only a passing flame, lit by the needs of the species, and extinguished as soon as these needs were satisfied. Schopenhauer goes even further in his analysis of sexuality. He observes that sexual desire is an extraordinarily powerful force, perhaps the most powerful of all those that act in us. It can push individuals to the most extreme actions, to risk their reputation, their fortune, their very life to satisfy this desire. Kings have abdicated for their mistresses. Empires have been overthrown because of sexual affairs. Wars have been triggered. Think of the Trojan War, triggered according to mythology by the abduction of Helen. Lives have been destroyed because of sexual desire, broken marriages, ruined careers, squandered fortunes. All of human history is traversed by this force, which operates in the shadows, often denied, repressed, but always present, always active. Why is this force so powerful? Why can sexual desire dominate all other considerations, sweep away all obstacles, disregard all prudence and all morality? Because it is the most direct expression of will. In sexual desire, will manifests itself without mediation, in its nakedness, its brutality, its fundamental irrationality. It is an impulse that does not ask permission from reason, that does not justify itself by arguments, that does not allow itself to be easily domesticated by moral or social conventions. It surges, imperious, and demands satisfaction. All societies have had to put in place rules, prohibitions, control mechanisms to channel this force. The institution of marriage, for example, is largely a means of regulating and controlling sexuality. Religious prohibitions concerning sexuality aim to master it, to submit it to moral rules. Conventions of modesty seek to make it less visible, less disturbing for social order. But despite all these efforts, sexual desire continues to overflow, to transgress, to create chaos. This immediacy of sexual desire makes it particularly revealing of the nature of will. When someone feels sexual desire for another person, they cannot really explain why. They can rationalize after the fact, invent reasons. She is beautiful, he exudes something, I like his way of smiling. But fundamentally, these reasons are only superficial justifications. Desire is there without reason. It is. You do not decide to desire a particular person. The desire surges in you, independently of your conscious will. You can even desire someone you do not like, someone you judge morally reprehensible, someone your reason tells you to flee. Desire mocks your moral judgments, your conscious preferences, your resolutions. In the same way, cosmic will is without reason. It is. In the experience of sexual desire, the human being touches, without often understanding it, the ultimate reality of the blind will that constitutes them. They have direct experience of what it means to be will, to will intensely without knowing why, to be pushed by a force one does not control, to obey imperatives one does not understand. Schopenhauer also notes an interesting phenomenon. The moment immediately following the satisfaction of sexual desire is often marked by a feeling of emptiness, disappointment, sometimes even disgust. The Latins had a term to designate this phenomenon, post coitum omne animal triste est. After the sexual act, every animal is sad. This post-coital sadness is a common experience, though often passed over in silence, out of modesty or shame. This experience is significant. It reveals the illusory character of desire. Before the act, desire promises intense satisfaction, fulfillment, plenitude. Imagination embellishes the desired object, anticipates extraordinary pleasure. Desire creates tension, urgency. It seems that if this desire is not satisfied, something terrible will happen, that life will be unbearable. All attention, all energy concentrates on this desired object. After the act, these promises appear hollow. Pleasure was brief, superficial. The person desired a few moments before can suddenly seem commonplace, without particular interest. The imperious desire that pushed toward them has disappeared, leaving place for indifference, even rejection. One wonders what one could have found in this person, why one was so obsessed with them. The charm is broken, the illusion has dissipated. This phenomenon is easily explained in the Schopenhauerian framework. Desire was not really directed toward this particular person as such. It was the expression of will to live, of the will of the species seeking to reproduce itself. Once desire is satisfied, once the act is accomplished, will no longer needs to maintain the attraction. The object thus loses its aura, its charm, its appeal. What seemed desirable, precious, unique, suddenly appears ordinary, even repulsive. This alternation of intense desire and disappointing satisfaction illustrates the fundamental structure of existence, according to Schopenhauer. Life is essentially willing, that is to say, lack, need, aspiration. We will because we lack. Desire is born from a void, an absence, a lack. I desire food because I am hungry, that is to say, because something is missing from me. I desire water because I am thirsty. I desire rest because I am tired. In all cases, desire expresses a lack, an insufficiency, a void that demands to be filled. As long as desire is not satisfied, we suffer from this lack. We are stretched toward the desired object, frustrated at not possessing it. This frustration can be slight, a small annoyance at not having exactly what one wanted at the restaurant. Or it can be intense, almost unbearable, the amorous obsession for someone who does not notice us, the devouring hunger when one is deprived of food for a long time. But when desire is finally satisfied, when we obtain what we wanted, satisfaction is brief, superficial. We eat, our hunger is appeased. But quickly, a few hours later, hunger returns. We obtain the object we have coveted for weeks. The excitement of possession lasts a few days, then the object becomes familiar, ordinary, and we turn toward a new desire. We conquer the person we desired. The excitement of conquest lasts a time, then fades, and we can even tire of this person. Quickly, a new desire surges, creating a new lack, relaunching the cycle. This cycle of desire and provisional satisfaction is endless. This is what Schopenhauer calls the pendulum of existence. We oscillate perpetually between the suffering of unsatisfied desire and the boredom of obtained satisfaction. There is no stable state of contentment. Either we desire and suffer from not having, or we have and are bored with possessing. Either we lack or we are blasé. The only escape from the suffering of lack is the boredom of satiety, and vice versa. This structure is not accidental. It does not result from poor organization of society or defective education. It flows directly from the nature of will. Will is incessant willing. It cannot stop willing. As soon as one desire is satisfied, another necessarily surges. Why? Because will is defined by willing. If it ceased to will, it would cease to be will. It is its very nature to will without end. Will cannot rest, cannot attain a final state of plenitude. It is condemned to will without end, to pursue goals whose realization procures only momentary satisfaction before new goals appear. It is as if we were on a treadmill that advances constantly. We run to advance, but the treadmill recedes at the same speed, such that we always remain in the same place. We pursue happiness, but it always recedes before us. The human being, as objectivation of this will, shares this condition. They are structurally incapable of finding durable happiness. Their existence is necessarily marked by suffering, sometimes the acute suffering of frustrated desire, sometimes the dull suffering of boredom. Moments of true satisfaction are rare, fleeting, and always precarious. Happiness is only a temporary truce in a perpetual war. Observe your own life. How much time do you feel truly happy, fully satisfied, without desire for something else, without worry for the future? These moments are probably rare and brief. Most of the time, you desire something you do not have, or you worry about losing what you have, or you are bored with what you possess and seek something new. This extremely pessimistic vision of human existence is one of the most striking characteristics of Schopenhauer's philosophy. It cuts radically with the optimism of the Enlightenment, with faith in progress, with the idea that human life can be indefinitely improved by reason, science, social organization. Enlightenment thinkers believed that humanity was marching toward a better future. that education, democracy, science would create a world where all could be happy. For Schopenhauer, all these hopes are vain. They rest on a misunderstanding of the profound nature of existence. No matter the technical progress, economic development, social improvements, the human being will remain fundamentally unhappy because their existential structure is that of lack, desire, unsatisfied will. One can improve material conditions of life, reduce poverty, combat diseases, establish more just societies. All this is laudable and can indeed reduce certain forms of suffering. A well-fed human being, in good health, living in security, suffers less than a starving, sick human being living in fear. This is undeniable. But this will not change the metaphysical condition of the human being, which is to be the expression of a blind will, condemned to will without end, and thus to suffer without end. Even the most privileged human being, one who has all material riches, all security, all health, that one too will suffer. They will suffer from boredom, from absence of meaning, from existential anguish. They will wonder, is this all? And will note with despair that yes, this is all, and that it is not sufficient. Moreover, Schopenhauer observes that the most developed, most prosperous societies are not necessarily the happiest. On the contrary, they often know high rates of depression, anxiety, psychological malaise, suicides. Why? Because when fundamental material needs are satisfied, when one no longer has to struggle to survive, when one no longer has to worry about tomorrow, boredom appears. And with boredom come existential questions. What is the meaning of my life? Why am I here? Where am I going? What does all this signify? These questions, to which there is no satisfactory answer in the Schopenhauerian framework, generate profound anguish, suffering perhaps even more terrible than physical suffering. For one can escape physical suffering, take medicine against pain, eat to no longer be hungry, sleep to no longer be tired. But how to escape existential anguish? How to answer why when there is no answer? The human being is thus caught in an insoluble dilemma. If they live in poverty, illness, insecurity, they suffer from these concrete ills. Their life is a constant struggle for survival. Each day brings its lot of difficulties, privations, dangers. This suffering is real, tangible, immediate, but at least it gives a meaning, a goal to existence, to survive. The poor person who seeks to feed themselves, the sick person who seeks to heal, the persecuted person who seeks security, all have a clear objective that orients their life. If they live in abundance, health, security, they suffer from boredom and absence of meaning. They no longer have a clear goal, no evident direction. They can do what they want, but precisely this freedom becomes a burden. What to do with one's life when all choices are possible? How to give meaning to one's existence when no objective imposes itself? This suffering is more subtle, less visible, but no less real. It is a suffering of the soul rather than of the body, but it is no less painful. On one side as on the other, suffering is inevitable. It is constitutive of existence itself. One can change the forms of suffering, one cannot eliminate it. This is what Schopenhauer means when he affirms that existence is essentially suffering. Faced with this overwhelming observation, one might think that Schopenhauer recommends suicide. If life is only suffering, if durable happiness is impossible, if existence is fundamentally absurd, why continue to live? Why not put an end to this absurd and painful existence? Would not suicide be the logical conclusion of Schopenhauerian pessimism? But paradoxically, Schopenhauer rejects suicide as a solution. Suicide, he says, resolves nothing. Why? Because suicide is an act of individual will that seeks to escape suffering, but in reality, it only affirms the will to live. How so? The suicidal person does not reject life itself. They reject only their particular life, the concrete conditions of their existence. What they want is not the negation of will. It is a different, better life, without suffering. If you ask someone who contemplates suicide why they want to die, they will probably tell you something like, "Because my life is unbearable. I suffer too much. I see no way out." But notice what this implies. It is not existence in itself that is rejected. It is this existence, in these conditions. The suicidal person would like to continue living if their life were different, if their suffering ceased, if their problems resolved themselves. Since this better life is impossible for them, they destroy their individual body. But cosmic will, it continues. It will objectify itself in other individuals, who will in turn know suffering. The suicide of an individual changes nothing to ultimate reality. Will remains, the world remains, suffering remains. Only the particular manifestation that has been destroyed changes. Moreover, suicide is a violent, desperate act that testifies to an intense attachment to life, precisely to the life one does not have and would want. It is not serene detachment, it is passionate revolt. Suicide does not liberate from will, it is a paroxysmal manifestation of it. It is will which, unable to obtain what it wants, destroys itself in an access of rage and despair, but it is always will that acts. So, if suicide is not the solution, what is it? Schopenhauer proposes a different path, the negation of the will to live. It is not about destroying one's body, but about transforming one's relation to will, ceasing to adhere to it, detaching oneself from it inwardly. This negation of will can take several forms. The first form is aesthetic. In aesthetic experience, in the contemplation of a work of art or of natural beauty, the subject momentarily exits their ordinary condition. They cease to be an individual caught in the flux of desire and suffering. They become what Schopenhauer calls a pure subject of knowledge, a contemplative eye that perceives things without relating them to their will, without asking how they could use them, possess them, consume them. In our ordinary life, we perceive things always in relation to our needs and our desires. We see a fruit tree and we think, "I could eat these fruits." We see a person and we ask ourselves, "What can they bring me? Are they useful for my projects?" We see a landscape and we evaluate its real estate value. All our perception is oriented, biased, instrumental. We never see things in themselves. We always see them in relation to our will. But before a beautiful landscape, before a painting, listening to music, the individual can forget themselves. They cease to think of their desires, their projects, their worries. They are entirely absorbed in contemplation. They look at the painting without thinking of anything other than the painting itself. They listen to music without relating it to their life, their problems, their desires. They contemplate the landscape without calculating what they could do with it. In this state, time seems to stop. Hours pass like minutes. The contemplator loses the notion of time. There is no longer past or future, only an eternal present. And above all, there is no longer suffering. For suffering is linked to willing, and in aesthetic experience, willing is momentarily suspended. The individual desires nothing, lacks nothing, wills nothing. They are simply there, present, contemplating. This suspension is only temporary. Sooner or later, the individual falls back into their ordinary condition. Hunger returns, reminding them that they have a body with needs. Worries resurge in their mind. Desires reawaken. The charm is broken, and the individual returns to the world of will, to the world of desire and suffering. But for a few moments, they have known a liberation, a respite. For Schopenhauer, art has this essential function, to offer moments of peace, of escape outside the prison of will. This is why art is so precious, why it touches something essential in human experience. It is not only entertainment or decoration, it is a window onto another manner of being, a manner of being liberated from the tyranny of willing. Among all the arts, Schopenhauer accords a particular place to music. Why? Because music does not represent objects of the world of representation. Painting represents landscapes, people, scenes. When you look at a painting, you recognize what is represented. It is a tree, it is a mountain, it is a face. Sculpture represents bodies, forms. Literature tells stories that unfold in the phenomenal world, with characters, places, events. But music represents none of this. It is pure sound form, melodic and harmonic movement that refers to no exterior object. When you listen to a symphony, you do not hear the representation of a thing. You hear sounds organized according to certain rhythmic, melodic, harmonic structures. These sounds speak of nothing other than themselves. For Schopenhauer, music is the direct expression of will itself. It does not pass through the intermediary of representation. It gives access, in an immediate manner, to ultimate reality. When one listens to a symphony, one does not hear the representation of something. One hears will revealing itself in its profound structure, its tensions, its resolutions, its conflicts, its appeasements. Music, with its ascending and descending movements, its tensions that demand resolution, its dissonances and consonances, its rhythms and pauses, reproduces the very structure of will, desire that tends toward a goal, satisfaction that momentarily resolves tension, then the appearance of a new tension. Music is the language of will, the speech of the thing in itself. This idea, as strange as it may seem, explains why music often touches us more profoundly than other arts. It speaks directly to our most intimate being, which is will. It resonates with our fundamental existential structure. This is why it can overwhelm us, move us to tears, transport us outside ourselves in a manner that other arts more rarely attain. Music speaks to us without words, in a language that precedes language, directly from will to will. But art, however powerful it may be, procures only temporary liberation. Aesthetic ecstasy does not last. For a more durable, deeper liberation, Schopenhauer proposes a second path, asceticism. The ascetic is one who actively, systematically denies the will to live. They do this not by suicide, but by renunciation. They renounce pleasures, desires, attachments. They live in voluntary poverty, chastity, detachment. This path may seem extreme, and it is. Schopenhauer does not claim it is accessible to all. It is the fact of a few rare individuals who have attained an exceptional degree of lucidity about the nature of existence. These individuals have understood that all satisfaction of desire is vain, that all pursuit of happiness is illusory, that existence itself is the problem. Having understood this, they cease to struggle, cease to will, withdraw from the world. One recognizes here the influence of Buddhism on Schopenhauer. He was one of the first Western philosophers to seriously study Buddhist thought, and he found in it a confirmation of his own intuitions. Buddhism teaches that existence is suffering, dukkha, that the cause of suffering is desire or attachment, tanha, and that liberation from suffering passes through the extinction of desire, nirvana. These teachings correspond almost exactly to Schopenhauer's philosophy. The Schopenhauerian ascetic, like the Buddhist monk, seeks to extinguish in themselves the will to live. They do this not by a violent act of destruction, but by a gradual process of detachment. They observe their desires without yielding to them. They detach themselves from the objects of their attachment. They cultivate indifference toward pleasure and pain, Progressively, will weakens in them, loses its force, ends by being extinguished. When this extinction is complete, the individual attains a state that Schopenhauer describes in paradoxical terms. It is a state that, for one who remains in the world of will, appears as nothingness. For it is the negation of all that normally constitutes existence: desire, willing, activity, becoming. For one who is accustomed to defining life by willing, the absence of willing seems to be death, nothingness, absolute void. But for one who accesses it, this is not nothingness. It is on the contrary plenitude, peace, final liberation. It is what Buddhists call nirvana, a term that literally signifies extinction, not the extinction of being, but the extinction of willing, of desire, of the suffering that flows from it. Schopenhauer is prudent in his description of this state. He recognizes that it is difficult, even impossible, to speak of it adequately. How to describe positively what is essentially negation, how to express with the words of the world of will what is beyond this world. Our words, our concepts, are all linked to the world of representation, to the world of willing. When we speak, we describe things, states, events that belong to the world of will. How then to describe what is not part of it? All one can say is that it is a state of absolute peace, where suffering has ceased because will has ceased. It is a state where there is no more lack, thus no more desire, thus no more suffering. It is a state of plenitude, not in the sense of being filled with something, but in the sense of lacking nothing. It is not positive happiness, exuberant joy. It is rather profound serenity, unalterable calm. Alongside art and asceticism, Schopenhauer mentions a third path, or rather, a third aspect of the negation of will: compassion. Compassion is the moral sentiment par excellence, according to Schopenhauer. It consists in feeling the suffering of others as if it were one's own. Faced with someone who suffers, the compassionate person does not remain indifferent. They do not say to themselves, "This is not my problem, it does not concern me." On the contrary, they are touched, moved, overwhelmed by this suffering. They want to alleviate it, to suppress it if possible. Where does this sentiment come from? For most moral theories, compassion results either from education, we are taught to be compassionate, or from rational calculation, I am compassionate because I want others to be so toward me, or from a divine commandment, God orders us to love our neighbor. For Schopenhauer, compassion reveals a profound metaphysical truth, the fundamental unity of all beings. Let us recall, the principle of individuation belongs to the world of representation. In the world of will, there is no separation between beings. There is only one will that manifests itself through the multiplicity of individuals. When I feel compassion for someone, I intuitively perceive this unity. I realize that the distinction between me and the other is only apparent. Fundamentally, we are the same being. Their suffering is my suffering. Their good is my good. Compassion is thus a form of knowledge, but an intuitive, non-conceptual knowledge. It does not pass through reasoning or argumentation. One does not become compassionate by reading moral treatises or following philosophy courses. Compassion surges spontaneously when the veil of the principle of individuation momentarily tears and one perceives the underlying unity. It is a direct perception of ultimate reality. This is why it has absolute moral value. Every truly moral action, for Schopenhauer, proceeds from compassion. The egoist who thinks only of themselves remains prisoner of the illusion of individuation. They see themselves as a separate being whose interests are distinct from those of others, even opposed. They act to maximize their own well-being, indifferent to the well-being of others, or even to its detriment. The compassionate person has pierced this illusion. They have realized, at least momentarily, that the separation between them and others is superficial, and they act accordingly. When they help someone, they are not really helping someone else. They are helping the unique will that suffers in this particular manifestation, and this will is also theirs. But compassion also has a tragic aspect, for it multiplies suffering. The egoist suffers only from their own ills. If they are hungry, they suffer from their hunger. If they are sick, they suffer from their illness. But they remain indifferent to the hunger and illness of others. Their suffering is limited to their individual. The compassionate person suffers from the ills of all those whose suffering they perceive. They suffer from their own hunger, but also from the hunger of the one who begs in the street. They suffer from their own illness, but also from the illness of all the sick of whom they have knowledge. The more compassionate one is, the more one suffers. One who has fully realized the unity of all beings suffers from all the suffering in the world. It is an almost unbearable burden. Imagine that you felt truly, physically, emotionally, all the suffering that exists at this moment in the world. All those dying of hunger, all those being tortured, all those who are sick, all those in mourning, all those who despair. This cumulative suffering would be crushing, literally unbearable. This is what the profoundly compassionate person feels, in their measure. This is why compassion must ultimately lead to the negation of will. When one fully realizes the extent of suffering in the world, when one understands that it is inseparable from existence itself, when one sees that each new birth is the beginning of a new story of suffering, one can only will that this existence cease. Not by an act of destruction, but by a refusal to perpetuate the cycle. Specifically, this means refusing to reproduce. It is here that Schopenhauer draws the most radical consequence of his philosophy. If existence is suffering, if this suffering is inevitable, if it flows from the very structure of will, then the only truly compassionate attitude is to refuse to engender new beings who will in turn know this suffering. To procreate is to create suffering. It is to condemn a being to existence without their consent, knowing in advance that they will suffer. Parents, in their desire to have children, generally believe themselves animated by good intentions. They want to give life, to found a family, to transmit something. They imagine the joys they will share with their children, the happy moments, the love they will give them. All this seems positive, generous, loving. But for Schopenhauer, they are in reality the blind instruments of the will of the species. They perpetuate the cycle of suffering. Each child who is born is a new slave of will, a new theater of unsatisfied desires, frustrations, pains. Parents never ask themselves if they have the right to impose existence on a being who has not asked for it, who cannot ask for it, who, if they could choose in full knowledge of what existence implies, would perhaps choose not to be born. This vision may seem excessively dark, even misanthropic. After all, life also contains moments of joy, happiness, beauty. There are laughs, friendships, loves, successes, discoveries. There is aesthetic ecstasy before a work of art, the intellectual joy of understanding something, the simple pleasure of a meal among friends, the beauty of a sunset. How can one ignore all this and see only suffering? Schopenhauer does not deny it, but he maintains that these moments are in the minority, ephemeral, and always precarious. Happiness is the exception, suffering is the rule. Moreover, even moments of happiness are poisoned by consciousness of their fragility. One knows they will not last, that suffering will return. This consciousness itself is a form of suffering. Present happiness is always darkened by fear of its future loss. Schopenhauer proposes a mental test to evaluate whether life is worth living. Let us imagine that we could question all those who have lived, ask them if they would want to relive exactly the same life, with all its pleasures and all its pains, all its happy moments and all its unhappy moments. How many would answer yes? Very few, Schopenhauer supposes. Most, if they are honest with themselves, would prefer not to relive this experience. This reveals that, in the global balance of existence, suffering outweighs happiness. If life were truly good, if it truly were worth living, everyone would want to relive it. But this is not the case. Most people, at the end of their life, are tired, worn out, ready to depart. They do not ask to begin again. They have suffered enough. Another indication of the predominance of suffering is our attitude toward time. We are generally impatient for time to pass. We wait impatiently for the end of the workday, the end of the week, vacations, retirement. We wish time to fly quickly. Why? Because the present is painful, and we hope that a better future awaits us. But when this future arrives, it becomes in turn a painful present that we want to see pass. We thus spend our life wishing it would pass quickly, which is a manner of wishing not to live. What a paradox. We desperately cling to life, we do everything to survive, and at the same time we want time to pass quickly, that is to say, for life to end rapidly. There is something profoundly paradoxical in this attitude. We are pushed by will to want to live, and at the same time we have the painful experience of this life we want. This contradiction reveals our tragic condition. We are condemned to want a life we do not really want, to pursue an existence that weighs on us. Schopenhauer also observes that we bear real ills better than the anticipation of possible ills. Reality is often less terrible than what we imagined. How many times have you dreaded something which, finally, turned out less painful than expected? But the anticipation of suffering, the anguish faced with what could happen, can be worse than suffering itself. This anguish is permanent. We live in constant fear of losing what we have, of not obtaining what we want, of undergoing unforeseeable misfortunes. This fear poisons even moments of apparent happiness. You have finally obtained the job you wanted, but you fear losing it. You love someone, but you fear they will leave you. You have accumulated riches, but you fear losing them. You are in good health, but you fear illness. This fear never completely leaves you. Faced with all this, the question arises, why do we live? Why does will exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? These questions are perhaps the most profound, most vertiginous we can pose. They have haunted philosophers since antiquity. Schopenhauer answers that there is no answer to these questions. Will is without reason. It has no goal, no finality, no meaning. It is, that is all. Every attempt to find for it a justification, a meaning, a reason for being, is doomed to failure. Will was not created by a god for a particular purpose. It has no plan, no destination. It does not tend toward a final state where all would be accomplished, where meaning would be revealed. It is the ultimate foundation, and a foundation cannot be founded on something else, otherwise it would not be ultimate. The chain of explanations must stop somewhere, and it stops at will. Why will is a question without answer, because why itself presupposes the principle of sufficient reason, which applies only to the world of representation, not to the world of will. This absence of meaning is perhaps the most vertiginous and most difficult to accept aspect of Schopenhauer's philosophy. We are beings who seek meaning. This is apparently a specifically human characteristic. Animals live without posing the question of the meaning of their existence. But we, humans, cannot help ourselves. We want to understand why we are here, what is the goal of our existence, what direction we must take. All religions, all optimistic philosophies offer answers to these questions. Christianity tells us we are here to know, love and serve God, and to gain eternal salvation. Islam tells us we are here to submit to Allah's will and merit paradise. Philosophies of progress tell us we are here to advance humanity, to create a better world. All these answers give a meaning, a direction, a goal to human existence. Schopenhauer deprives us of these consolations. He tells us we are here without reason, that our efforts serve only to perpetuate a blind will, that our sufferings are vain, that our quest for meaning is an illusion. This truth is difficult to look in the face. This is why most people prefer consoling illusions. They invent goals, projects, significations for themselves. They tell themselves stories to make their existence bearable. They tell themselves they work to ensure the future of their children, that they are building something durable, that they contribute to the progress of humanity, that they accomplish God's will, that they realize their potential. All these stories give an apparent meaning to their life, a justification for their efforts, a reason to continue. But these stories change nothing to reality. Will continues its blind work. Individuals are born, desire, suffer, reproduce, die. A new cycle begins, identical to the preceding one. Nothing truly progresses. Human history is only an endless repetition of the same patterns: conflicts, wars, temporary reconciliations, new conflicts. Names change, epochs change, but the structure remains the same, because human nature remains the same, and human nature is only the expression of eternal will. Men of the 21st century, with all their technology, are not fundamentally different from men of antiquity. They have the same passions, the same desires, the same fears. They suffer for the same reasons. The will that expressed itself through the ancient Greeks expresses itself through us in the same manner, with the same blind force, the same absence of finality. What remains, then, is the possibility of lucidity, not a lucidity that would bring happiness or give meaning, but a lucidity that permits at least to see things as they are, without embellishing them, without beautifying them, without lying to oneself. This lucidity has its own value, even if it brings no consolation. It is the lucidity of one who has understood that existence is absurd, that suffering is inevitable, that meaning does not exist. But who, despite everything, continues to live, not by hope of future happiness, not by belief in a hidden meaning, but simply because they are there, because life continues, because will continues to will through them. This lucidity perhaps permits a form of existence more serene, more detached. No longer an existence guided by the illusory goals that will suggest to us, but a lucid, sober existence that has ceased to await something that will not come. An existence that has renounced great hopes, and that, precisely for this reason, is no longer disappointed. Schopenhauer promises nothing. He does not say this path will lead to happiness. He says simply that this is the truth, and that truth, even terrible, is worth more than illusion, even consoling. It is the wager of all authentic philosophy, that understanding is worth more than ignorance, that lucidity is worth more than blindness, that truth is worth more than falsehood. In the contemporary world, dominated by obligatory optimism, by the injunction to happiness, by the perpetual celebration of life, Schopenhauer's voice resonates as a salutary counterpoint. It reminds us that existence is difficult, that suffering is real, that meaning is not given. It invites us to sobriety, to measure, to consciousness of our limits. This voice will never be in the majority. It cannot be. The will to live is too powerful for the majority of human beings to renounce it. But it can speak to those who, at a moment in their life, have felt crushed by the absurdity of existence, who have glimpsed the void beneath appearances, who have felt that something was not right in the official narrative of happiness and meaning. To these individuals, Schopenhauer says, "You are not mad. What you feel is justified. Existence is indeed absurd. Suffering is indeed predominant. Meaning indeed does not exist. You have simply seen more clearly than others." This lucidity is a burden, but it is also a liberating truth. For once one has seen, one can no longer pretend. One can no longer take refuge in common illusions. One must live with this knowledge, find a manner of existing despite everything. And paradoxically, it is perhaps this very consciousness of the absurd that makes possible a form of authentic existence, stripped of false hopes and paralyzing illusions, an existence that looks truth in the face, and that, despite everything, continues.